All right, so now that I have it in Illustrator and it's traced, I can use Illustrator to clean it up and refine it. And we have to remember our Illustrator tools. So if I want to merge two paths, I select both of them. I want to use the small selection tool and select just that path and then add in just this path. For some reason it's selecting all of them, but let me see. Illustrator always has quirks. Here, I can actually do it this way. So it's conceptual creativity sometimes gets tested here. Find ways to separate things out creatively. There we go. Holding down Shift, we get it all. Okay, so now we use the Pathfinder tool, and I'm going to merge them. So they're all one. And I just did that on a separate layer just so I could see it clearly. So now that whole eye is on its own layer. And that allows me, once it's one layer, to fix the kind of overlap area just with the pencil tool. Remember, you can set your pencil tool by double clicking to be either more accurate or more smooth. Then other areas you might want to fix, you just go through, you just smooth them out. If I want more of his eyebrows showing for coloring, I can do that. But don't obsess about it too much or it can take all your time. We want to get to the coloring, which is the new thing for this project, the types of digital coloring involved. So once you're happy with your line work, I'm just going to smooth out the sickle here. Very nice. Then it's time to stop using Illustrator and start using Photoshop with this as your line work. And it's like a stained glass window. And because I like this approach so much, and it can be used in such a variety of ways, I have two different little projects I want to try it on. But this is kind of the sillier of the two. So that looks good. So now I save it in Illustrator as an EPS file onto the desktop. It's no longer a PNG, which is a transparent raster file. It will be an EPS file with just those black filled paths. Then I can close Illustrator. So all these different ways of digital inking, in my varied experience, this is what I like the best. Inking it by hand and then bringing it into Illustrator and live tracing it and then correcting it until it's what I want. But depending on your drawing style and your preferences, you might have different ways of doing it. And that's just fine. Okay, now I can quit Illustrator. I don't need these. Don't need anything on the clipboard. Instead, what I need is this EPS file on the desktop. And then just like we did with your logos, instead of opening up the EPS file in Illustrator, which will force me to rasterize it, I open up a new file in Photoshop. That's the size I want it to be. And this is now my assignment. So assignment 7, spot illustration, and this is Putin. playing with a word game, Putin on the Ritz. All right, so I want it to be 8 by 10 inches at least. Maybe I'll make this one more like 9 by 12 inches, but 12 inches high, because this is vertical, 9 inches wide, by 350 pixels per inch. RGB color. You can make it any size you want, but that's going to be the size it will print. And now I want to bring my EPS and just drag and drop it into that. And notice it's a smart object. So when I hit return and place it, it's linked to a vector. So it won't let me do things like paint on it, which is good. And no matter what size, it will always make it the perfect number of pixels for that size. So I can keep coloring behind it at different levels. All right, now I'm going to lock that layer additionally. And so what I have is a blank white background and then black line work on top. What I can now add into it is flat color, the first stage. Simple coloring, just filling in the empty space behind. So if I'm doing a Sunday comic, I might do my line work like this, but when it comes time to color it, I just want flat, simple colors behind. And those go on their own layer. What's interesting is even though my vector line work is locked, and it's a vector, I can still use the magic wand with contiguous turned on to select different areas, but then I can't paint them, right? So let me say I pick a skin tone, and then I try to paint it with the paint bucket. Because it's locked and because it's a vector, it won't let me. But then I can move that selection to the flat color layer, and I can drop it in. In fact, I can use that magic wand, go to my vector line work, hold down Shift, and select all of the skin tones. The only problem would be if there's a big opening somewhere in it where it wouldn't allow me to. And then I can go to this flat color layer, I can pick a skin tone, just a generic skin tone, and paint it in. Now, why did it color within his harness here and within the shapes here? Well, that's because there's openings in the line work. So there's a few ways you can fix that. The easiest way is to simply use a paint tool instead of the paint bucket, right? And so because I'm coloring behind the black lines, I don't need them to be perfectly filled in. I just need to paint within the lines and color it. So to paint flat color, I just choose a brush. I'm using the pressure sensitive brush for scale, 100% hardness. I pick my color, and I simply paint behind the lines. And if I overshoot, it's okay. Everything is going to get filled in eventually. So this is flat coloring. When choosing flat color, the other term for it is local color. It's whatever the color of the thing is, no matter the lighting condition. So if it's a banana, it's yellow. If it's bear skin and not polar bear skin, it's brown. So flat color does not have any particular lighting to it. So his skin is going to be one color. And maybe that looks too dark and too tan, so I can modify that color. Pick something more pale. And the beauty of digital coloring is I can simply replace all the colors I used by using the paint bucket, because all those colors are touching. You see? So I just use the paint bucket with the new color, it replaces all of them. And in my swatches here, it will show me the last color I used. So I can always pick it from there too. So if I wanted to go back to my brush, I can start painting with this new color. Now where it is closed in, like his face, even though his eyes will get filled in too, remember I can click on my line work, use the magic wand with contiguous turned on, and just select those shapes and then go to my flat color layer and paint them in. I think that will work with the legs as well. Use the magic wand, fill in these shapes, hold down Shift so I can do both of them, and then go to my flat color layer and fill them in. Okay, now what about his bare skin? I want kind of a reddish brown, so let's try that. Hold down Shift. And I'll do the same flat color for those three uses of the bear fur. Go to my flat color layer, drop them in. And where I overshot with my paintbrush, it's no big deal. Now I'm going to paint with this new color and just stay behind the lines. And you see we kind of clean it up as we go. Now, while I have that paintbrush, this is something we're going to be doing a lot of. It's pressure sensitive, so the lighter I touch, the less will get filled in. But I can hold down Option at any time and change it to the paint dropper tool so I can select a color from my own image. So I'll be doing that a lot. And we learn all these skills right before we do digital painting. Very helpful. All right. Now what if I want to change that color? Well, I can use the paint bucket, select a different color, drop that in instead. And if I want something in between those two colors, I just push a little bit more red into it. Like so. So that's how flat coloring works. Now I'll do my big shapes that way, but by and large I'll just use a brush and paint these flat colors in at 100% opacity. And that's step one. And I'll often do a little color test by hand, just so I'm not wasting a lot of time experimenting. But that's because I was trained without a lot of digital tools. Because whether you experiment in your sketchbook with markers or colored pencils first and kind of figure out your plan, like here is my color comp. Or whether you just experiment a lot in the digital side, you want to kind of know what your end product is in mind. Now, the reason I like to do a little traditional sketch like this is I can actually open that up in Photoshop and steal colors directly from it. Now that I'm just filling in. So if I open up that color comp in Photoshop, let it float next to or on top of my image, or even arrange it so I have the two side by side like so. I don't need this one to be very large, so I'm just going to steal colors from it. Then I can simply, if I want like the gray color of the harness, I can simply use the dropper tool to pick that color and then immediately paint with it. Now don't worry, as you color, you're going to replace other colors